morning. My name is Ross. I'm happy you joined me this morning in the room and online. Welcome. Here in Dubuque, it's supposed to be a really chilly 60 degrees. Anybody? I better see everyone wearing shorts. I wore my special peel-off jeans because there's shorts under these that I will be wearing today, and I'm excited for you and me, but we all know snow comes in the morning. I'm sure. I don't know. Anyways, hey, we're going to walk through our passage in the book of Mark this morning. I'm going to invite my good friend Mariah to join me. Mariah is a great friend and also one of you. Each and every week, we've been asking some of you to read through the scriptures publicly. We believe that honors God and one another as we walk through his word together. And so Mariah is going to be a part of that. Thanks, Mariah, for serving like that. So open to Mark 6, verse 30. And as you get there, either in the book you brought, the Bible specifically, or the Bible below the seat in front of you or your phone, get there, because I want you to read God's words that he spoke himself, okay? They're not Mariah's or mine, they're his. And so please read along, and Mariah, take it away.
All right. The apostle gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And so he began teaching them many things. By this time, it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. "This is a remote place," they said, "and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "That would take more than a half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat?" "How many loaves do you have?" he asked. "Go and see." When they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of the men who had eaten was 5,000. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, he went out to them, walking on the lake. He was about to pass by them, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately, he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. When they had crossed over, they landed in Gennesaret and anchored there. As soon as they got out of the boat, people recognized Jesus. They ran throughout the whole region and carried the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, into villages, towns, or countryside, they placed the sick in the marketplaces. They begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak, and all who touched it were healed.
Thanks, Mariah. Thank you. That's awesome. You know, when you hear the word shepherd, what comes to your mind? I know for me and probably many of you, we might picture something cute and nice. Maybe a stained glass window with a shepherd portrayed on it, a child's Bible illustration, which is definitely my home right now. They look cute and nice and sweet. Maybe a guy in a bathrobe holding a lamb. I don't really know what comes to your mind, but I know those are a few that come to me. We begin to think it's nice, it's safe, it might be kind of cool. But that image would have been almost unrecognizable to a first century Jewish audience. Because in the ancient world, shepherding wasn't a sentimental picture. Actually, far more, it was one of the hardest, lowest, most demanding jobs a person could have. A shepherd lived outside 24/7 with the sheep. Scorching heat during day, bitter cold at night. It wasn't a 9 to 5 as you and I think it. They were always on, always protecting, always leading, always caring. And you were personally, as a shepherd, responsible for all your sheep to keep them safe, nourished, out of danger. If you joined us at the movie David not long ago, we took the church to a movie night. It was a blast. We filled 2 theaters. Many of you went, and it was awesome. What you saw at the beginning of that movie was this tender-hearted care and leadership of the shepherd David, right, fighting off the evil from the sheep. Very part of the picture there, a typical shepherd would carry a rod and a staff for protection and guidance. Tools in order to do the job, the diligent job of a shepherd to keep the sheep safe. And here's what's really striking about shepherds, I already said a little bit of, is that a good shepherd would lead with this care for his sheep. Typically at night, the shepherd would lay his own body down across the opening of the sheepfold or the pen to keep them safe. As he rested, they rested. He would ensure nothing would get to the sheep except through him. Some dads, moms in the room, you feel that in your own house, right? Nothing gets to my kids except through me. Maybe, do I just tell myself that? Maybe it's just me. But also a good shepherd drove the flock. He led them. He led them to green pastures. He led them through unknown terrain. He led them to water, to nutrient, to food. He led them diligently. The sheep would know the shepherd's voice, would trust the shepherd as they followed. Now, why does all this matter? Because over and over in the Old and New Testament, we see this crisis of God's people identified as sheep without a shepherd, wandering and lost and needing a pathway to be saved, needing a leader to bring them to salvation. And we see that in the person of Jesus. Actually, at a critical point in our passage today, Jesus identifies people as sheep without a shepherd. And we see him do something very important that's going to illuminate the final shepherd he is. The good shepherd, our shepherd, the final shepherd, to lead his people then and us today and to eternity to come, through the hardships of life, the good and bad times, a shepherd to care for us, to feed us, nourish us, protect us. So if Jesus himself is revealing to us what a good shepherd looks like, well, what kind of shepherd is he? If you're taking notes with us today, the first point is this: he's a shepherd who cares, a shepherd who cares. We begin to see a critical turn through the book of Mark. You saw it in our illustration, Jesus carrying, right, a lamb. He begins to show us this messianic shepherd he is, starts in this passage. Before we get to the crowds, though, and the miracle we just read, I want us to get back to the 12. Remember these 12 guys, some burly, some not. He called them out of their old lives to follow him, Jesus, on this pursuit of making his ministry, his kingdom come here on earth. They would be empowered to preach his name, remember, to be with him, to be empowered to cast out demons, and they're coming back from being sent out to accomplish that very mission in and through Jesus. And they're coming back and reporting, hey, we cast out demons, we healed people, all in your name, Jesus. We preached you. And you could imagine, after such a mission, how exhausting that must be. And Jesus, as a good shepherd, he knows. Passage tells us he begins to call them away. But right before this, though, something critical has happened. Herod just beheaded John the Baptist, and although the passage doesn't tell us that they are burdened with this news necessarily, most likely, I would argue they knew. And so you can imagine they come to him both in exhaustion from the mission that was at hand. They're coming back to report, but also the burden of the brokenhearted news that one of their very own was killed. You might be thinking, they might be saying, wait a second, Jesus. I'm called to be with you, to preach you, be empowered by you. I could die for that? Yet Jesus, in their potential fear, out of a heart for care, invites them to again, come with me, he says in verse 31. Buy yourselves to a quiet place to get some rest. Jesus says, and so they go and seek a solitary place. Now, throughout the book of Mark, we've been met with many interruptions. From Jesus teaching to demons rising up, right? To demons shouting out an interruption, yet here's another interruption that we find in verse 33. But many who saw them leaving, as Jesus says, get in the boat and go, recognized them and ran on from all the towns to get there ahead of them. So we begin to see this approach from the people who are wanting to be near to Jesus. That's very popular in his ministry. People are thinking, like we've talked in weeks past, what can Jesus do for me? I need healed. I need this. Let's go find it, right? Good-hearted intentions for some, just transactional intentions for others. And yet they see them go off in this moment where it's intended to be a rest and relaxation retreat, solitude, right? Which is important for all of us, doesn't discount that importance. But yet they begin to see they're going out on the boat. If the wind's like this, they're going to be there. So the crowds, what do they say? Run! Let's go! We got to get him! Let's go! And like the masses, they meet them ahead of where they're at. Now, verse 34 is that critical turn we talked about. When Jesus landed and saw the large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus immediately steps out, and a plan to bring his disciples to a solitary place is met with thousands of people. Imagine you driving home from work in your car. You get to your house, open the garage door, walk up your stairs or whatever, walk in your house, and there's thousands of people there, right? It's crazy. This is wild. And a time when you intended to go home and rest or just be with your family, you're found with thousands. My house couldn't fit that. Most likely, many of yours couldn't. If yours could, invite me over for lunch after today, okay? Love to come over. See you. No, just kidding. Remember the key crisis we talked about at the beginning in my opening? People being without a shepherd, without care, guidance, safety. Jesus is now changing that. And what does he have for them? Compassion. Now remember what compassion is. It's a deep-welt feeling, maybe sympathy, empathy for a person that moves out of love towards action to care for them, to love on them, to act on their behalf or within their life. So compassion looks like taking action on the love, the spring of love that you have for a person, a group, a people. So Jesus, stirred by this deep love and mercy for a people, looking to be who? Sheep without a shepherd, has compassion, and now we begin to see this arc of the shepherd Jesus is. He cares for his 12, but to the masses, he's the same God. Has compassion, and what? Cares for them now. How? Well, first, he cares for their spiritual need. Verse 34, if you're taking notes with us. He cares for their spiritual need. Quickly, Jesus lands, sees their sheep without a shepherd, and begins to do what? Verse 34, teach them many things. Do you see, friends? Jesus is first. His first response is his word, a spiritual need the people have, both you and me have. He feeds them spiritually. Jesus knows that the deepest hunger in every person's life isn't physical, it's spiritual. And that applies to me and you too. We all hope and strive for meaning, for forgiveness, for something that lasts in our life, for something beyond this life that we're innately looking for, that we're designed for. And yet we're seeking that, and Jesus knows these sheep, what they need most is spiritual. It's me. It's my word. And so he begins to teach him that. Well, what does that practically look like in our lives, though, today? It's still his word. Why do we as a church preach and walk through the very words of both Jesus and God, the Old Testament and New, right? All of his words collectively, why do we walk through that? Because his word is the very spiritual nutrient you and I need to be fed by, to live, to find and have everlasting life in him, to be edified in how to live a life here today, obedient to him, guided by him. It's still his word. And so Jesus tackles this very spiritual need that they have first. What might it look like for us sitting back into his word? His word isn't something you grow to learn enough and move on from. It's what you consistently stay in each and every day until kingdom come. The reality is his word is something you must be going back to, being refined by his spirit, illuminating God's commands to you, obeying them, empowering you to live a life worthy of the calling of salvation. For me and you to grow to understand more of what it looks like to be like Christ, his Christ-likeness, what it looks like. But not only that, it's also joining groups of other believers and gathering with others who point you back to that very same truth, who are living it out beside you, maybe some years ahead of you as your example, maybe some years behind you as you become an example to them. It's a group, it's a people he's building, creating his church, which he calls you to be a part of. Looks like abiding and depending on Jesus through prayer. And when I say prayer, we might think, man, that's a dusty old thing I haven't done in a while. But yet it's pursuing him, petitioning on our own behalf before him, our great heavenly advocate, Jesus, who's already advocating on our behalf, actually sitting with him prayerfully in pursuit in our own life, praying for our neighbors, our situations, our current status. God, where do I need to be reminded to be yours in this situation? Where do I need to be reminded of who you are in your word? God, illuminate that to me, and the Spirit does a good work through our prayers. But it's not only the spiritual needs you've already seen that he goes after, it's also the physical. Secondly, Jesus cares for their physical need in the following verses. Now, prior to Jesus feeding the crowd, we see this really interesting interaction from the disciples. And to be honest with you, we read this passage and you can probably relate a little bit, right? The first response, right, from the disciples is they show up looking for this solitude. I don't know if they were getting on the boat going to Cancun. I don't know what they had in their mind, like this is going to be a place. And they show up like you to your house with the 5,000 people, right? And they're like, this wasn't like the plan. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. Jesus told us he didn't lie. I'm just trying to figure this out. And so what's their response? Out of an unexpected interruption, what do? Well, it's getting late. They're hungry, logically so. The disciples are tired. So what do they? Let's send them away. Let's send them to the McDonald's. Okay, let's send them to Burger King. I don't know. Let's send them there. They didn't have none of that, but let's send them away to buy something, Jesus, because we've been doing this thing, but let's go ahead and get them out of here. I wouldn't say that's out of a negative heart necessarily, but they begin to be missing the point of who they're with and what he's doing in the situation, because he's not only providing spiritually, he plans, Jesus, to provide physically, and he answers. Out of that response, send them away. What does Jesus say? You give them something to eat. So here's where the miraculous gets even more logical. How am I supposed to do that? What am I? This would take more than a half year's wages. And we are to go and to spend that much on bread and give it to them? Okay, first of all, let's just point this out. Half year's wages to feed 5,000 people, man, that's a lot of money in today's world, right? I mean, whoa. If it only takes a half year's wages to feed, that could be a lot. Are we go to spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat, they say, right? So in their limited perspective, as tired, as maybe depleted in some way disciples in this moment. They go to their natural reasoning and saying, God, this isn't going to work. And what does Jesus do? He simply says, how many loaves do you have? What do you have? Go and see. And they bring back 5 loaves, 2 fish. See, sometimes in our life, when we look to defer an invitation, especially from God, on maybe a mission of serving someone, of providing for someone, sometimes we like to just defer those and say, I just reasonably can't help with that, I don't think, so let me just defer it. Instead, Jesus simply says, I just want what little you have and let me multiply it to the magnitude we see that they're about to experience and know. I just want your yes. I just want you. And the little you have isn't much of nothing at all, but I want to provide in and through you. And we see this shift in perspective from Jesus, in the disciples here. They look to their own means first to provide for God's people in the wilderness. And yet Jesus is like, you've got this a little bit wrong. If I'm the shepherd, the good shepherd, these are the sheep without a shepherd. If I'm that guy, I'm just looking for your yes and the little you have, which is really nothing at all. And I want to provide through you. Jesus takes what little they bring, he blessed, he broke, and he gave. And what's happening here before our eyes is much more than mere generosity and love of Jesus. It's a messianic provision that almost echoes of years past. You may not think or know much of the years past for the people of Israel, for the people of God in the Bible, and that's okay. I'm so glad you're here. You don't have to. But Jesus is providing this messianic provision because if you start to line up the pieces here of who God has provided, the providing a physical need through multiplied food in a desolate place, a wilderness, if you're a Jewish reader, you're going to begin to recall, oh, I remember a time God did that back then. God met and tested and provided for his people in a wilderness, gave them manna to eat. Just as God provided it in Israel in the desert through Exodus, Jesus is now providing it for his people in the wilderness at this time and place. And what that was back then is miraculous. What this is right here is miraculous, right? We can see it right off the page. Like a few loaves and fish don't feed 5,000 people. But yet Jesus, in providing in their physical need, begins to do just that, and abundant and more. He provides them a daily bread, caring for their physical need, but really started in a place that he's that bread of life they ultimately need. That meal, that nutrient that they need desperately to be saved, to be transformed, a satisfaction that never spoils, a provision that never runs out. And we see it beginning in the spiritual, but yet showing itself on brilliant display in the physical. As we begin to see the disciples pick up 12 basketfuls and broken pieces of bread and fish, everyone had been full already, and yet they have an abundance and more than they could ever ask for or imagine. The tension we must wrestle with when it comes to Jesus being a shepherd that cares is it's easy for us to believe that just right off the cuff. If I asked half the room or more, hey, do you believe Jesus cares? Your answer would probably be like, yeah, he cares. For sure, Jesus cares. Yeah, for sure. I know for a fact he cares. But most of us, if I ask, if you believe Jesus cares for something going on in your life or you might step back and struggle to believe that. The same answer you had, yes, Jesus certainly cares, you then apply to yourself, and you're like, I don't know. My situation's really big, Ross. Do you not see that? And this situation seems too small for like a big God to even touch or want to care about. I'm just kind of dumb. All things not true. If we're honest with ourselves, we're not convinced that he's enough for what's in front of us today or enough for what we need today. See, that's the real tension, my friends. that we wrestle with when we see Jesus, a shepherd who cares. We think of the bills that are adding up that we cannot pay, the diagnosis that's come back, the relationships that's failing, the ministry he's called you into according to his purpose that feels weighty. You're leading a Bible study or a small group, or you're leading a part of our ministry efforts here at Hope Church, and you're pressing back darkness into a world full of it. You're pressing it back and bringing God's light, and it feels weighty. And yet, do we begin to turn and calculate our own ability instead of resting in his? Do we turn and calculate and turn it away and say, I can't do this? You're actually right, you can't. But do you know the shepherd who can? The disciples looked at the same Jesus we know today and said, send them away. And they were lucky enough to personally, tangibly see Jesus provide miracles then and yet again. And in light of what we see and know in our own personal life, as we've surrendered our life to Jesus, we then begin to doubt and wonder if he cares about us in the same way. We affirm his compassion, his care in our theology, but we default in self-reliance in our Monday through Saturday. We default in our own power every other day of the week. But he is a shepherd who's inviting you to more, who's guiding you into a daily rhythm with him. As the disciples of Jesus, we're not sheep without a shepherd any longer, and neither were they. We're sheep with a great shepherd that has compassion even for our small and big things in life, for our spiritual need and our physical, for the situation you are facing and the doubts you have in the back of your mind you're afraid to share with anyone else. Big or small, he sees and he knows. Jesus is a shepherd who cares for his sheep. Secondly, in this passage, we see that Jesus is a shepherd who leads. We talked about that as a characteristic of a shepherd back in ancient times, but now we're seeing in a picture of the life of Jesus. And in the second half of the passage, we recognize the leadership of Jesus might surprise us. Starts in verse 45 because we see the disciples are guided by his plans. Immediately, people are fed. And Jesus made his disciples get into a boat, verse 45, and go ahead of him to Bethsaida while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up to a mountainside to pray. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake, verse 47, and he was alone on land. Verse 48, he saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Now, what's unique about this passage is Jesus didn't just give this lofty option, right? He made them get into boats and go across the water while he retreated to pray. Now you might think that's a little odd. It's not really up to this part of the context. Jesus would often go retreat and pray, both as an example to us, but personally himself, sitting before God in prayer, the Father. So he goes to pray. Now, oftentimes let's think and let's pause here. When Jesus sends them out into the water, there's this reality like, okay, we know it's going to be tough. We see it's getting tough. Why did Jesus do that? And if we're honest with our lives, we often tend to think that walking in God's will or being commanded to being guided by his plan should lead to a smooth and an easy life. Let's be real. We fall into that trap all the time. Hey, if I'm doing what God asked me to do, my life should be smooth and easy. Things should be fine. But in reality, we're not promised that if we're following Jesus faithfully, it's not that we shouldn't hit storms of life, but let me remind you that faithfulness doesn't promise a frictionless life, but it does promise a fruitful one. So your faithfulness to God throughout your life doesn't promise, hey, no friction, no hardship. He talks a lot about when you face those hardships, just know they're coming. Here's how you can respond. He doesn't promise no friction, but he promises fruit in your life. He promises by your faithfulness, he will bring fruit. And so the reality is they get sent out on a boat and are met with waves and winds. Jesus isn't surprised, and nor should they be. So look at what's happening here. The disciples are exactly where Jesus told them to be. They're in the boat because he sent them to be there. As Charles Spurgeon said in a sermon, their sailing was not merely under his sanction, but by his express command. They were right in the place they were supposed to be, yet met with a terrible storm. Jesus purposely sends them and they run into trouble. And naturally, this passage begins to have us ask, well, where is Jesus? And we already know he's on a mountainside. He's praying. But no, where is he right now? Why didn't he stay with them? What's going on? And it can feel like that for us sometimes, can't it? See, sometimes through life, through the winds and the waves and the struggles, we can begin to wonder, where is God after all? Where is he? And in this passage, we're reminded that he's not a God who doesn't see, he does. And actually, he's not a God who isn't with, he is. Verse 48, he saw the disciples straining, remember, at the oars, because the wind was against them. See, he saw them every step of the way in the darkness of night. He sees their struggle. He knows their pain. He knows what they're enduring. He sees the wind and the waves. He's not a God that doesn't see, and that's where we find in their struggle they're met with a God who's blessed who's blessed us by his presence. In verse 47, Jesus begins to make his move. He walks across the water, intended to pass them by, so we can really understand casually walking. They're tested in this storm, and what they see, they thought is a ghost. They cry out in terror, the passage tells us, verse 48. Now, we don't get the full picture of the terror necessarily. I was going to act it out the best I could, but I would have to put myself in a place. I could, I went through haunted houses at a younger age. I don't anymore. I don't do haunted houses. Those are scary. My screams of terror were super loud. And typically it came with me forcefully putting someone else in front of me, I'm a bigger guy, and just saying, hey dude, you die first. I don't know. I'm just you go first. And at times I would just shove the guy into the clown and I would just run out and they would just get out of my way. And they're like, okay, you paid for this? And I'm like, yeah, I paid for 30 seconds of my life to be ruined. So I'm not looking to do that anymore. You guys, some of you ask me every year, my answer is no, and I tell you no, but you still do whatever. But what begins to happen is he walks across, he sees them in the fear, and immediately in verse 50, he spoke to them and said, take courage, it's me. They think they saw a ghost, they're terrified, yelling in fear. He says, don't be afraid, it's me. And it could be Jesus just simply identifying himself hey dudes, it's me, chill out. But his wording, I believe we stumbled upon something even better. In light of the book so far of Mark, we're beginning to see and witness Jesus, the grand reveal of who he is. The Son of God, come to be sent to be a servant to save. And in this understanding, what begins to happen is Jesus uses really choice words that some could recall from a God who did as well. We see a picture here of this final shepherd who's come for God's people, who is God himself. And what does he say? The same or similar words God spoke to Moses at a burning bush. I am. I don't think that's a coincidence that Jesus rolls up, meets their fear, their greatest time of terror, and says, it is I. And what happens after that? Similar to what we see when God speaks to Moses, the I am, right? We begin to see his identity, his power show up where he steps into the boat, the winds and the waves, they calm because there's power in his presence. 51, then they climbed in the boat with him and the wind died down and they were completely amazed, which you and I would be too. See, they answered, his presence alone answered all their fears and their terrors and brought peace to a situation which was terrifying. All by his presence. And here's why that matters for us today. Because when we see this encounter of Jesus walking on water, we may recall it and know it really well. There's another instance where Peter himself, he's walking across too. But in this instance, when he steps into the boat, that changes everything. And Jesus is not here physically with us today. He's in heaven. But what he's given us is his presence spiritually by the Spirit. Both a person of him, person of God, same mind, heart as God, Jesus, Father and the Son, with us today. And as we believe by faith, we have his presence with us today. As we believe by faith, he stepped into the boat of our life with us today. Now, that doesn't mean that all the storms of life just immediately calm, does it? Let me be the first to say no. I walk into a ton of storms of life that aren't just calm just because, and I know Jesus is with me. But I certainly face hardships in life, and do you know what it brings calm to? Me. I face hard situations, scenarios, and you know what begins to happen? I can step back and say, Jesus, you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And I know whatever I face today, in you, Christ, I'm strengthened, I'm strong. I'm bold. God, I have you, and you're with me. So the world can tear me down. The situations can be unimaginably difficult and hard, bring me to tears, and cause me to wonder, but God, you are with me, my great shepherd. It's your presence that changes me. Notice the situation didn't change. It was simply his presence that changed everything. The boat's still in the water. The winds just died down. He's the great shepherd who steps into our boat today like he did with them then. Remember the promise of Christmas. It was just a few months ago. For some of us, it's a blur. But if you remember anything, remember the promise, Emmanuel, God with us. That's seen and found through the person and work of Jesus by his Spirit today. In you who believe. Among us as believers. Jesus is with us, but how often does our fear blind us? Oh, friends, fear can blind us. Fear can take a front row seat where Jesus is commanding to be front and center. Fear can steer us into so many decisions, sinful or not, attempting to separate us from the present reminder that he's with us and he guides us, even through the roughest of waters. Later in the passage, verse 52, as we close, they had not understood about the loaves and their hearts were hardened, even this moment where they've seen it all, and yet they have hardened hearts. They couldn't connect what Jesus had done before the people or in the boat with them today. See, Jesus is the shepherd who cares for his sheep, both spiritual and physical. He's a shepherd who leads by guiding his sheep, but not without his presence. And really, this whole passage brings us back to the heart of the gospel as I close. See, here's the deal. Everything we've seen in this passage, it finds its ultimate fulfillment at the cross. The shepherd who fed 5,000, who blessed and broke and gave, would one day allow his own body to be blessed, broken, and given for you on the cross. The bread he broke in the wilderness points forward to the body he gave on the cross, the bread of life torn into pieces so that you could be made whole. And the shepherd who walked through the storm in the darkest hour of the night to reach the disciples in the boat is the same shepherd who walked through the darkest night in human history, the night of the cross, to reach you so that he could be your way, revealing to you the truth, that you may have the life everlasting, the light of the world in you. That he would bear the full weight of the wind and the waves, the wrath of God on your behalf, in your place, in my place, because of our sin. That he would bear it all on the cross so that we could be presented sinless, holy, righteous before our God and be with him forever. So that he could step into the boat of our lives today and say, take heart, it's me. Don't be afraid. In me, nothing can overtake you. No sin ever holds you any longer. And it's by faith we receive. He says of himself in John 10:11, I am the good shepherd, and the shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. An ancient world true of old come true in the Messiah before us today. Jesus laid down his life so that you could become his sheep. Jesus laid down his life so you and I could be part of his pasture. that we could be cared for, both our physical and spiritual needs, that we could be led and guided by him, that we could be his people. And the question today isn't whether or not he's a good shepherd. He's proven that. It's whether you have allowed him to shepherd your life. Whether you've turned in faith to allow him to be the good shepherd of your life. Or are you still wandering through this one? Because of the promise of the gospel, if you belong to Jesus, place your faith in him, you'll never be a sheep without a shepherd again. Some of you today actually need to do just that. You've come so close in times of past, really wrestled with your faith journey with Jesus, and come to a point where you've never actually given your life to him to be your shepherd. You've been looking to lead yourself, to guide yourself, to lean on your own wisdom or wisdom of the world. And let's be real, it's not cutting it. It's not leading you to a full life. It's leading you into further wandering and hardship and heartbreak. And today needs to be your step of placing your faith into the Good Shepherd, Jesus, into his hands, allowing him to be the shepherd who cares for you, who guides you and leads you, who died for you. And the Bible tells us by your faith, you're saved. By your faith in Jesus, you are saved. And you can step into that today. Some of us other in the room though, we have been following Jesus for a long time, but what really perked up in the story of Jesus walking on water is how he is still with us presently and steps into our boat. See, today for you, Christian, you have been walking through life uncertain if he cares about even the little things. And you might be similar to the disciples, unsure of where Jesus is in the big. But today you're reminded that he is a God, he is a shepherd, that in and through Jesus, by his Spirit, is with you in the boat. And today you need to begin to peel back some of that fear, some of that anxiety that steers you away from reminding that he's with you, and fix your eyes and focus on him. Giving him your little to make an abundantly lot in your life. Fix your eyes on him, friend. Let me attest to you that when you do, the peace will come. Storms may still be raging. That situation may still be big or small. But he's with you. And when the shepherd's with his sheep, what are we reminded about in the ancient times and now? They're protected. They're loved. They're led. They're cherished. They're cared for. They're fought for. Because he's with us. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I pray that you would help us as people respond however we need to this morning. Holy Spirit, you know what's on the hearts of each individual person in this room, including me, and where we need to take a step towards you. I pray that you would help us do that. That you, God, would help us do that. May we muster up what little we have, which really isn't anything at all, and come to you, God, who doesn't require us to have anything, but by our faith, we are saved. By our faith, we're made new. And by you, Jesus, we're set free. I pray that you would help us experience those realities as we turn and fix our eyes to you, as we trust you, commit our lives to you. So God, we love you, and I pray as we respond in song, you would help us do just that, take steps towards you. In Jesus' name, amen.